Our first reading is a reading from the first book of Kings. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. God said, "Ask something of me, and I will give it to you." Solomon answered, "O Lord my God, you have made me your servant, a ruler to succeed my ancestor David. But I am a mere youth, not knowing at all how to act. I serve you in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a people so vast that it cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart, to judge your people and to distinguish right from wrong. For whom is able to govern this vast people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon made this request. So God said to him, "Because you have asked for this, not for a long life for yourself, nor for riches, nor for the life of your enemies, but for understanding so that you may know what is right, I do as you requested. I give you a heart so wise and understanding that there has never been anyone like you up to now, and after you there will come no one to equal you." The word of the Lord.
Our response today is, Lord, I love your commands. Lord, I love your commands. I have said, O Lord, that my part is to keep your words. The law of your mouth to me is more precious than thousands of gold and silver pieces. Lord, I love your commands. Let your kindness comfort me according to your promise to your servants. Let your compassion come to me that I may live, for your law is my delight. Lord, I love your commands. For I love your command more than gold, however fine. For in your precepts I go forward, every false way I hate. Lord, I love your commands. Wonderful are your decrees, therefore I observe them. The revelation of your word sheds light, giving understanding to the simple. Lord, I love your commands. The second reading is a reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, we know that all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to God's purpose. For those who were foreknown were also predestined to be conformed to the image of Christ Jesus, so that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those whom God has predestined are also called, and those whom God called are also justified, and those whom God justified, God has also glorified. The word of God.
The Lord be with you. Thank you. A reading from the book of Matthew. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together, one of them an expert in the law, and tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." The gospel of the Lord. Thank you for that. Let's all take another deep breath in together. Let's let it out with a little sigh. So I kind of made this joke this morning. I don't want to make church a competition, but I want to see how y'all do against the 7:30 a.m. and the 5 p.m. last night. Who remembers the story of Joseph in his Technicolor coat? Oh, do not tell the other services that you were louder than them. I had to remind the 7:30, you could be a little louder. I know it's only 7:30 in the morning, but I think it's okay. It's all right. All right, so I'll just give you a brief recap since so many of us remember this story. So Joseph was like the most beloved of the sons of Jacob. And the brothers knew it, and it drove them crazy. One day, he even gave him a Technicolor coat. That made them even more mad. And I have an older brother, so I really understand this. I'm definitely I was the favorite. Let's say that. So then he had a dream, and in the dream, he actually saw that his brothers would bow down to him. And he didn't even word it that way, but that's sort of what the brothers took it as, and then they were even more upset. So they went a little bit drastic, but they sold him into slavery. It's a little excessive, but again, I have an older brother, so like I said in 7:30, maybe he didn't read this part of the Bible because he would have come up with that idea if he could get rid of me in any way. So they come back to their dad like, oh, I don't know, here's the coat. He was just like eaten by an animal. Such a typical older brother. I mean, there's like 11 of them, right? So they're like, oh yeah, we're all together. This is what happened. So Joseph ends up imprisoned in Egypt. And again, remember, he's a dreamer. And he starts to interpret dreams of some of the imprisoned. And eventually Pharaoh catches wind of this, and he likes what he's hearing. And so he brings Joseph into his court. And he raises him up above everyone else in Egypt, only below himself. So he starts predicting from the dreams that there will be great wealth, and they will have a multitude of grain and income, and that things will be very well for Egypt for the next 7 years. And he's right. Things are going great. And eventually his brothers, who are in Canaan, realize and hear that there's grain in Egypt. So they travel to Egypt, and they show up. Lo and behold, there's Joseph. Who remembers what happens at this point? What do you got? Shout it out. Do they remember Joseph? No. Does Joseph remember them? Yes. So he kind of just rides it out, right? He's like, oh, I'm just going to see what happens with this. He gives them the grain. He actually loads up money and gold and jewels in with the grain and sends them on their way. They return home to their father. They're opening everything up, and they find all of this extra gold and jewels, and they're like, did you steal that? Did you take that? I didn't do this. How did we get this? Oh, we're going to get in so much trouble. And there's a real panic about it. They're not sure what's happened. And some time goes by, and there's some other details in there, but they eventually go back again. And there's Joseph, and of course, he remembers them, because you don't forget your brothers who sold you into slavery, right? You're like, I'm not going to forget these guys. But he welcomes them into his home, because now he's living large with the Pharaoh, right? He's having a good old time. He's no longer imprisoned. He's at the top of the food chain. So he welcomes his brothers in. And finally, I think, he must have, after a while, just been like, gosh, you guys are real dense. I'm your brother. Seriously. And they didn't believe him for a little while. Like, it still took several verses of convincing. And that's where the story goes on, but that's where I really want to stop, because I want us to focus on that. Because I think the reality is, the reason that we're in all of the trouble that we're in right now is because we have all forgotten that you are my brother, you are my sister, you are my sibling. Every one of us has forgotten this. It's not one group of people. It's not one side of the political spectrum. It's not just the conservatives. We have all forgotten who we are and that we come from one another. Now, I've just been so touched to be here and participate in this weekend. It's been actually very healing for me, because I grew up in, I don't often say this, and this is going to be live streamed, but I'm going to say it. I've been protecting my family for a long time, so I don't normally say the church that I belong to, but I grew up in the Episcopal Church, which we used to call the Diet Coke of Catholic. Like, we have a lot of your same rituals, just like a little less Mary, a little less saints. But some of the words are almost the same. So Reverend Seeley's like, you know the words to these things pretty well. I was like, yeah, I do remember most of it. But I grew up in that church, and the church itself now is one of the more liberal denominations. I use that loosely, but they think they're one of the more liberal denominations. But growing up, I loved Jesus. I loved Jesus. Once we went to Manhattan, and I saw one of the soapbox preachers on the soapbox, and I stopped and talked to that guy for 15 minutes. My parents were like, we have to go. What are you doing? Everyone else is just ignore him, don't talk to the... I loved to talk about Jesus. But I lost that. Because when I came out in my early 20s, my community said, you're not welcome at this table anymore. Friends called me and said, I can't be your friend anymore. I was like, you don't have to call to tell me that. Just don't ever call again. It's very simple. There wasn't Facebook or cell phone. I would have just been like, oh, Barbara disappeared. That would have been the end of it. You did not have to tell me that. I feel like Joseph's brothers would probably say that too. And I had a real crisis of faith. In fact, I left the church. I renounced Christianity. I renounced everything that I had known or loved or believed in. And people asked me over the years, was kind of losing your family and the friends and stuff the worst part of it? And I said, no, losing God was. Because that left a hole inside of me that was not fillable by anything else. There's nothing on this earth plane that can fill that void of longing to connect with God, with the Father, with oneness, with the divine. And I struggled for a lot of years. I didn't want anything to do with anything that had to do with... If I saw a person driving with a little fish on the back of their car, it took everything in me to not flip them the bird. There are children present, so I won't do it here, but it took everything in me. I was so angry. I thought it was God's fault. And I think about Joseph. I wonder if he thought it was God's fault. Maybe he did for a while. It's natural to think, why? How could this happen? How can people behave the way that they behave and call themselves Christians in this world? How can they stand in opposition to everything that seems to be exactly what Jesus said here? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. The answer to that is, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how we got here. Some days I feel like things are better than they've ever been. I think for LGBTQIA plus 2S people in this world, things are in a way better than they have ever been. And yet, whenever there is that progress forward, there is always the pullback. We have faced that in every movement of social justice in the history of especially this country. We had the first black president only to be followed by what came after that, which I will not say, although he is my brother. And when we can't actually take that step to say, he too is my brother. The woman who called me and said, I can't be your friend anymore. I love you. And it's not easy. This one parishioner after the 5 o'clock service came up to me afterwards and she's like, you're way more enlightened than I am. I said, oh honey, this kicks my butt every day. I just want to do the work. I don't know if you all listen to Brene Brown or have read her books, but she was talking about a conversation she had with her husband. She goes, I don't think people do the best that they can. No, I never think that. And her husband, Steve, said, well, I don't know if they do, but I know I feel better when I think that they do and that they're doing the best that they can. And I hold that in my heart. And I want to take us one more step back with Joseph. What if Joseph is a representation of the LGBTQIA plus community? I mean, he gave him a rainbow coat. Okay? I'm just saying. Just saying. And he was set out from his land, from his people, like so many of us have been. He was cast away from the table, from that table that so many of us have been cast away from. But he was a dreamer. And he wasn't afraid to dream beyond what he knew. And I believe we aren't either. You know, they say children are the future. I mean, the children are right now, right? And these kids, they do not tolerate hatred, racism, bigotry. One of my friends who is pretty, again, I use the term liberal loosely, but she's a Diet Coca liberal. And she was mistaken, not me, but another friend who was trans. She kept saying the wrong pronoun on accident, not intentionally. And her kid was like, "Mom, get a grip. It is not that hard." And I love you. I love you so much. But that's what we have the opportunity to do and be. We pull this place forward. And the fact that you can do it from inside the church walls is even more powerful. Because look, Joseph's brothers, they were kind of jerks. But I know some of those people. And Joseph would have been vindicated to say, I'm not even going to tell them I'm his brother. I'm not going to give them any grain even. He could have sent them away with nothing. Because if it was reversed, they probably would have sent him away with nothing. Again, my brother might have considered, he went, I don't know for a second. Because we have that pain, that same struggle that they had of jealousy and envy and thinking there's only enough room for some of the folks at the table. But that's the mistake we make. There's room for everyone. Everyone. So I hope that we'll be Josephs in the world. Josephines, Joe. We could be Joe. Everyone, that's gender neutral. We could be Joes in the world. At every turn where we might have been turned away, or we might have been treated unfairly, or we might have suffered great and tremendous oppression, which happens every day in this world. We still have the opportunity to step back and say, I see you. You are my brother. You are my sister. You are my sibling. We get to be the better versions of ourselves. Who doesn't want that? I know that I do. Not because I feel like then I can kind of return home and be sort of vindicated for it. Not out of a sense of ego. But kind of like what Brene Brown's husband said, I know I'd feel better if I just tried to see everyone as my sibling. Everyone who I didn't believe was on my side. Everyone who I thought was against me. Who would I be in this world if I was more like Joseph? That's what I encourage all of us to find out. And I know that many of you are already doing this work. The fact that we're sitting here today says to me that you're already doing this work in the world. You're welcoming everyone at your table in a church that has notoriously not welcomed everyone at their table. So I want to thank you. You might feel like you want to stand up and applause when I get done talking. But for me, I want to tell you that you've healed something in me. So thank you.
not sure who you really are, when all you feel is the shape of your scars, and you've got more wounds than you can count, open your eyes, look all around. You aren't alone, this is your home. Come and remember who you are here. Do this to remember who I am. Come and remember you belong here. All belong here. When you don't know how to forgive, when locked doors seem like the only way to live, and you've got more questions than you can count, open your eyes, look all around.